So when we look at what you might call clarion call of the Keynesians in the foxhole from Robert Lucas, we get to a point where everyone is a Keynesian again. The IMF, the G20 are all interested in coordinated stimulus. But that lasted less than a year. And in the United States, we've just been through an election where people are claiming that that was all a waste of time. How do you see the Keynesian stimulus and the disequilibrium of the macroeconomy now in light of these 2 years and at least the beginning of a government stimulus program in many countries?
It's a very interesting question. I think Keynes was revived in a purely superficial way. And I think that shows how deeply embedded the anti-Keynesian views were. I think how deeply entrenched Chicago was. And also, yes, Chicago especially. This was the fount of the training of most economists for 20, 30 years. And something happened which was quite contrary to what their theories told them. Their theories, and I'm not just talking about theory at the highest level, but also financial theory, suggested that collapses of this sort just couldn't happen. Mm-hmm. Regulators accepted that. Governments accepted that. So they thought that the financial markets were self-regulating. And then they turned out not to be. And this was a terrific shock. And I think the stimulus was a political response. I think politicians were wise enough to realize that they couldn't allow the slide down to go on to the depths of the Great Depression of the early 30s. They had to do something. And Gordon Brown and others, and Obama, they coordinated a big recovery, and everyone was for it. As soon as things got a bit better, they thought, oh, well, I think two things happened. First of all, as things got a bit better, they lost their belief in the need for any more. And then I think there were genuine crises of confidence in the sustainability of fiscal deficits, which frightened them. Mm-hmm. But to my way of thinking, there was one message of Keynes, and you referred to it right at the beginning, which is economies don't have strong recovery mechanisms, market economies. Mm-hmm. They have to be helped out of the foxhole. Mm-hmm. They don't just bounce back. And I think what's wrong about some of the present policies of austerity is that the assumption is they do bounce back, or that all you have to do is to end the deficit and the private sector will take off like a rocket again. Because what the deficit is doing is crowding out all this investment that is waiting to be made in the private sector, but is stolen somehow by the government. Now, I think that's not even Chicago economics. That's pre-Chicago. It's pre-Keynesian economics, actually, and yet people like our Chancellor George Osborne seem to believe that story. They say so anyway. And I find this incredible. But what it shows is that the recession was not sufficient to blast out of the minds of policymakers the things that had been taught for the previous 30 years.